Hello and welcome to another video here on this channel. My name is Alex and welcome to my photography and camera gear review channel. So today I wanted to do a review on this Yongnuo 50mm 1.8 with the EF mount, and more specifically I wanted to review it based on my experience using it with the Lumix G9 and the Viltrox adapter. I know I did a review here recently of another lens, and I want to continue to make these review videos because I feel like there is a lot of still for me to learn from this. So hopefully this could be a little bit better than the last one. So I'm still trying to figure out how to best approach these review videos. Best thing that I can come up right now is to give you the pros and cons. So in this video we will touch about the pros and cons about the lens on its own, and also share with you the pros and cons of using this lens with the Panasonic Lumix G9 using the Viltrox adapter. And if you watched it again, I have put a little video together of different clips that I have taken with this lens, of the type of footage and the type of content that you will be able to create with this lens and using the Panasonic Lumix G9. So without further ado, let's start with the pros about this lens. And I'm gonna do this off the top of my head. I don't have any script to follow, so if I'm all over the place, I apologize in advance. I think I know well what I'm gonna talk about, but I just want to give you the warning just in case. But anyways, so the first thing that I really like about this Yongnuo 50mm 1.8 is that it has a very low aperture. This lens comes at a 1.8 aperture, which means that the lens will let a lot of light to get in while using it with your camera, which makes it ideal for anyone who would like to get those really sweet blurry backgrounds, or the bokeh that people call it. And it makes it also very usable in low light. Now the cool thing is that when you use this lens and you pair it with the Lumix G9 using the Viltrox adapter, due to the adapter this lens goes from a 1.8 aperture to a 1.3 aperture, which means that it will allow the sensor of the camera to capture a lot more light, and it could be very usable in low light. In fact, I'm gonna post a small clip here of a test that I did so that you can see how this lens performs in low light at different ISO levels.
Alright, so here is the Lumix G9 and the Yongnuo 50mm. Right now the aperture is 1.3, the shutter speed is 50. I'm recording at 24 frames per second, and the ISO is at 100. So this is the low light test. Right now I'm gonna bump the ISO to 200. Right now it's gonna go to 320, 500, 800, 1000, 1200, 1600, 2000, 2500, 3200, 4000, 5000, 6400, 8000, 10,000, 12,800, and that is the maximum ISO that you can get this camera to.
So as you can see, this lens is not that bad to use in low light. And here's also a couple of portraits that I've taken with this lens so that you can see the type of blurry background that you will be able to get. So not bad for a $50 lens, is it? But yeah, this is the very first thing that I like about this lens, and that is why it is the first pro that I have noticed over my time of using it. Now the second pro is that this lens is very lightweight. I believe that the reason for that is because this lens is made entirely out of plastic, and yes, that even includes the lens mount, which for some people this could be a negative thing about this lens because it's not made out of the highest quality materials. But if you are maybe a hiker, or if you like to pack light and you travel a lot, then this would be a good lens to throw into your camera bag. I personally use it as a secondary lens, and it is a good option if you don't want to take your expensive Canon 1.4 or your Canon 1.8 lens on your trips, and this is a good lens to have in your camera bag at all times. So that is pro number 2. Now pro number 3 is that this lens has a focal length of 50 millimeters. Now that on its own on full frame, it's good for portraits, but when you pair this lens with the crop factor on the Panasonic Lumix G9, this lens goes from a 50 millimeter focal range to a 70 millimeter focal range, which makes it ideal for portraits or maybe street photography if you like to go out and shoot people on the street. Wait, that sounded kind of wrong, but you get what I mean. But yeah, this makes it a really good option if you wanna do that. The fourth pro, and I think this is the reason why a lot of people might be considering this lens for their DSLRs, or in this case their Panasonic Lumix G9, is because of its affordability. This lens is pretty inexpensive. I personally bought this lens in 2018, brand new, for $50. I bought it off of Amazon. I know that the price on there has gone up a little bit recently. I think now it's like around $70 to $80 for this lens, brand new. But if you don't mind looking into the used market, you could easily find this lens for about $50 to $60 on eBay or on Facebook Marketplace. So it's a fairly inexpensive lens, and like I said, it's, in my opinion, it's a good secondary lens to throw in your camera bag when you don't want to use that more expensive glass. But although you get decent results with this lens, I personally wouldn't pay more than $80 for it, because if you're paying more than $80 for this lens, I would much rather go with its rival, the Canon 1.8 50mm lens, because this lens does have a lot of drawbacks, and that allows me to move on to the cons. The first con, and we already touched briefly on this during the pros, but this lens is mainly made out of plastic, and it could feel very cheap on the hand. It feels like if you drop this lens a couple of times or you hit it against the wall on accident, you might break this lens. So this is the first con the first thing that I don't like about it. Even as I'm moving it here on my hand, it feels like it's about to fall apart, and it makes some weird noise as you move it. So I don't know if this is normal for these lenses, but I definitely don't get this much internal movement on the Canon 1.8. The plastic build also makes it very prone to scratches. I don't know if you could tell, but there's some scratches here, and it just feels like it's made out of cheap material. So that's something to keep in mind if you're thinking of getting this lens. There's no a lot of metal parts in it, so just keep that in mind if you're thinking of grabbing this lens for your Panasonic Lumix G9. The second con, and I think this could be something that affects a lot of people out there who are looking for a nice prime lens to maybe record video or take some nice pictures, and that is the autofocus. Now the autofocus on this lens works decent with the Canon native camera, but if you're using it with the Viltrox adapter and the Lumix G9, be prepared to wait a little bit longer for this lens to actually snatch focus on your subject. For pictures, I noticed that it takes between 5 to 10 seconds to be able to snap focus on your subject. For video, forget it. You will not be able to use this, the autofocus at least, for video, because it would just make a weird noise. In fact, here I'm gonna put another clip so you can hear the noise that this lens makes when using the autofocus feature on the Panasonic Lumix G9. So as you can see, with the purchase of this lens, you will not only get a 50mm 1.8 prime lens, but you will also get a very powerful 350 horsepower engine. In fact, this lens already sounds like a 1964 Mustang starting on a cold winter morning. So maybe it's not a bad deal after all if you're grabbing this lens and getting all those other things with it. Now moving on to con number 3, and this also has to do with the focus on this lens. And that is that if you're planning on buying this lens to use it for video, then like I said earlier, you will not be able to use the autofocus because that thing will give you nightmares. But you could use the manual focus. Now the thing that I've noticed, and this only happens with this lens specifically with the Lumix G9, is that I'm not able to use the focus picking option on the camera. That is a very useful feature on the Lumix G9 because it allows you, as you move the focus ring, to zoom into your subject automatically and see if your subject is on focus. Now, like I said, this is the only lens that I'm not able to use that feature on the Lumix G9, so it makes it very difficult to snap focus correctly while using the manual focus option on this lens. Another thing is that the focus ring is extremely loose, and it could be very hard to get sharp focus on your subject because you have to, in a way, hold it in place as you are trying to record video, and even if you move it a little bit, you're bound to lose focus. So that is another reason why for videos this lens could be a little bit tricky to work with, because you either have to be very experienced and know what you're doing and know how to kind of find a way to keep focus on your subject, or it could be very hard for you to get good footage from it. So now moving on to con number 4, and that is that this lens lacks internal stabilization. Now it comes to no surprise, especially at this price range. Luckily for us, Panasonic Lumix G9 shooters, is that the camera itself has an amazing IBIS. So here's a video so that you can get an idea of how this lens works with the camera internal stabilization compared with the stabilization on the camera turned off. So as you can see, it makes a world of a difference when you have stabilization on the camera and using this lens. If you're planning on using this lens for video and you want to see how the walking shots work with stabilization, here's another clip so you can see how that works as well. So as you can see, the fact that we have good stabilization on the Panasonic Lumix G9 really helps a lot, especially when the lens lacks internal stabilization on its own. And now moving on to the last con, or at least the last con that I was able to think about using this lens, and that is the fact that it is a little bit softer than its original rival, the Canon 1.8. So I noticed that this lens becomes a little softer at its widest aperture, which is 1.3 when paired with the Panasonic Lumix G9. But as you increase the aperture, the lens tends to get a little bit sharper. So if you don't mind a little bit softer images while using this lens at its full aperture, then this could be a good option for you. So those are the pros and cons that I have noticed about this Yongnuo 50mm 1.8 with the EF mount. Conclusion is that this lens is it's a good lens if you plan on using it for maybe family events. You are a hobbyist who just wants a prime lens so that you can get those nice blurry background on your pictures. Maybe you want to take some cinematic video here and there once in a while. This is not a bad deal. Again, I wouldn't pay more than $80 for it, because in that case I would much rather save the extra, I don't know, $30 to $40 and just buy the original Canon 1.8. With that lens you get a lot more sharper images. The autofocus is not as noisy as the autofocus on this one, and it just feels more quality. It's made out of higher quality materials. And here, let me grab that lens real quick. This lens does have a metal mount. So if you are a person who loves to have higher quality lenses, then the Canon 50mm 1.8 would be a better option for you. But like I said, none of these lenses are bad. You still get decent quality with this one. It's just that this one feels more premium, that's all. And it's a little heavier too. But yeah, I hope that you liked this review. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. I heard somewhere there that it helps with the YouTube algorithm, and YouTube will show this video to more people. So if you are willing to help me with that, I'll greatly appreciate it. Also, if you enjoy this type of reviews, if you enjoy anything that has to do with editing, photography, editing video, and anything pretty much that has to do with photography, you're more than welcome to subscribe to my channel. Also, if you have any questions, suggestions, ideas, anything that I might have missed on this video and you would like to know more about, make sure to leave those in the comments section below. But don't leave just yet, because at the beginning of this video I promised you that I was gonna put some footage together so that you can see how this lens works with the Panasonic Lumix G9 and the Viltrox EF M2ll adapter. So here it is. I hope you enjoy it, and again, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.